Today, I want to talk about the fact that many physical things are pictures of spiritual things, which is entirely logical when we consider Bible verses like Romans 1:20, which tells us that what can be known about God can be seen through what is created. In other words, when you look at the physical reality that we inhabit, it's a picture of God, not the busted up, screwed up parts. Okay? That's a picture of other influences screwing things up. Okay. But if we look at the original creation, we can see a lot of things, including ourselves, that are brilliant pictures of God. Just as when we look at a work of art, what are we looking at? We're looking at an expression. We're looking at a piece of that artist. We're looking at that artist's spirit being expressed physically. Just like that, which is why we honor the artist, right? Not just the piece of art. We honor the artist more than the piece of art. It's the same with the creation. So I'm going to give you a whole bunch of examples. Number one, the universe itself. Okay? They say the universe some people say it's infinite. Some people say it's constantly expanding at the speed of light. I am of the opinion that both are correct. How? Because God is infinite. Okay? And as such, the physical existence that he creates would mirror that and be a picture of that. So, many scientists and theorists, they say, well, what is the universe expanding into? I'll tell you exactly what it's expanding into. Okay? Because I know. It's expanding into the infiniteness of God. Literally. Because the physical realm is encapsulated inside of the spiritual realm. It's just a fact. Because with God, there's no size. There's no big, there's no small. So it can just keep getting bigger forever, because size means nothing when you're in an infinite spiritual God. Same going small, right? You can always get smaller, right? No matter how small of a particle you get, doesn't matter. If there's a particle, you can still cut it in half, right? To infinity. Because you're only cutting it in half, right? If you just think of it that way. And why? Why is it like that on the big scale and the small scale? Because God's infinite. He's not bound by size. Size is a product of the physical realm for our benefit. That's one picture where you can see God. A picture of a physical thing being a picture of spiritual, of God. Number two, many things in the physical realm, waste products, i.e., feces, dead bodies, rotten, food, shells of food, anything that nobody wants or nobody can use, people or humans or plants, right? Any living thing, if it creates a waste product, or it itself, once the life of God leaves it and it becomes just a physical shell, right? These are all waste products. What happens to those? God has so ordered and structured this physical existence in our planet that we live on, that all of those things become food and ingredients for other mostly living organisms, but also just physical processes, right? And what happens? All those other little bacteria and fungi and moss and bugs and all that stuff, mold, okay, all the microscopic world, as well as some not microscopic world, and then physical elements, it all takes that stuff, breaks it down to at an elemental level, and puts those elements back where? Back into use for new living things and new beautiful parts of the physical creation. So it just starts all over again. Okay? Have you ever noticed that? It's kind of cool the way the world is. Now, how is that a picture of something spiritual? Because that's exactly what God does with our lives. As it is in the physical, so it is in the spiritual. He takes all the broken pieces, all the broken parts, all the sinful, bad, whatever, right? As a huge, broad area of brokenness, pain, whatever, okay? Death, it doesn't matter. Anything that's produced by the fallenness of the world, okay? He takes all of it and turns it to good, right? You may not have experienced this yet because everybody's in the process of becoming aware of God, right? Some people aren't even aware of him at all yet, which is fine. Most of us were there at some point, so don't judge if you already are aware of him. I myself, I don't judge those who aren't aware of him. I understand there was a time when I wasn't sure if he existed either. Okay. But, right, we all grow. But, sorry, I got off on a rabbit trail. God, once you get to know God, he takes all of that stuff and turns it around for good. Eventually, okay? You learn this the older you get because it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight, right? Usually, I mean, he can. There's some things I've seen one instant healing in my life, so he can. But mostly what I've experienced and witnessed is the slow transformation, right? He slowly takes all the bad, all the pain, and he's like, okay, I can work with this. And he employs slow, consistent love, right? Healing, working through people, working through his spirit, working through his correction, working through any and all of his qualities, right? Inside of a relationship helps. And he turns all of that stuff for our good. Okay, that's the story of the Bible if there ever was one, right? So again, the physical representing the spiritual, because God never changes. Third example. Okay, this will probably be the last one. So, if you think of the physical realm, it hates a vacuum. Okay, nature hates a vacuum. We all know that. The same is true in the spiritual. Okay, if we look in Genesis 1, we can see the first departure of human beings away from God, right? And what happened? As they went away from God, actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. So that story where they partook of the fruit and got deceived by the serpent and all that. It's interesting to note that in that story, God wasn't there. Right? Why? How do we know? Because he had to come looking for them? We hear them walk. It says they heard the sound of God walking in the garden and he was calling to them. So when they partook of that fruit, he wasn't there. So if you look at that in a spiritual sense, you say somehow they had left God's presence. Don't know why, don't know how, but they did. Right? Probably like little kids. Hey, let's sneak away from dad, right? Let's see what we can find over here. That's my guess, is how that happened. Okay? Right? So, and what happened? The further away from God they got, the more evil they discovered. There was the serpent, there was the temptation, there was the first sin, all that whole stuff, right? We all know that story. Okay? And what happens when you have a spiritual vacuum? Something must fill the void. There can't be nothing in the physical realm or in the spiritual realm because nature hates a vacuum. Why? Because in the spiritual realm hates a vacuum too. Something's going to fill the void. So if it's not God and his love, it's going to be things that are not of God and his love. It's completely logical. Okay? So if we want to get away from evil and bad, right? And sin and any of that stuff in our lives, what's the solution? Getting close to God. Right? As it is in the physical, so it is in the spiritual. Thank you and have a nice day.